Calvin Thorne's hand lingered on Susie's lower back, his expensive watch glinting under the Riverbend financial Christmas lights. He dismissed my handshake, his gaze fixed on Susie, and I felt like a ghost in my own marriage. Prairie Point? He scoffed, loud enough for others to hear. Some people just don't know their place. The Riverbend financial Christmas party hummed with a forced cheer. Tiny white lights blinked on a towering spruce in the lobby, reflecting off polished marble floors. Jed steered Susie through a cluster of well-dressed men, their laughter a little too loud, their ties a little too tight. He spotted Calvin Thorne by the open bar, a man everyone knew, a man who seemed to cast a shadow even in a room full of light. Calvin was talking to the CEO, his profile sharp against the festive backdrop. His hand, as it gestured, revealed the glint of an expensive watch, the kind that cost more than Jed's first car. Susie, ever polite, offered a small wave as they approached. Calvin's eyes, a surprising shade of pale blue, swept over Jed briefly before settling on Susie with an unnerving intensity. He left the CEO mid-sentence, moving towards them. His smile, when he directed it at Jed, didn't quite reach his eyes. For Susie, it shifted, becoming something else entirely, a predatory flicker that tightened Jed's stomach. "Calvin Thorne," Jed said, extending his hand. "Jed Miller. This is my wife, Susie." Calvin's grip was immediate, a dominating squeeze that felt less like a greeting and more like a challenge. He held Jed's hand for a beat too long. "Jed Miller," he repeated, his voice smooth, almost purring. "Prairie Point Developments." He released Jed's hand, dismissing it, his attention already back on Susie. "Prairie Point? Ah, yes. We rarely do business with outfits like that, not quite our scale." The words hung in the air, a quiet public dismissal that made Jed's ears burn. Susie, sensing the shift, gave a tight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Calvin took a step closer to her, his hand lightly brushing her lower back as he leaned in. "Susie," he murmured, his voice softening, "you are truly extraordinary. Riverbend, frankly, doesn't deserve you. You deserve more than this place can offer." Susie's laugh was thin, a high, awkward sound that vanished quickly. She shifted her weight, and her fingers found Jed's hand, squeezing once, a silent distress signal in the crowded room. Jed felt a chill, not from the open lobby doors, but from a deeper recognition. This wasn't just a powerful boss with bad boundaries. This was a man who saw what he wanted and moved in for the kill. He was a predator, bold and unapologetic, right there in front of everyone. The Christmas lights seemed to dim, the festive music fading into a dull thrum in Jed's ears. 6 months later, the memory of that party still pricked at Jed sometimes, a low hum of unease. Then one Tuesday evening, Susie came home, dropped her purse onto the kitchen counter with a thud, and let out a frustrated sigh. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight. Jed looked up from the local paper, a silent question in his eyes. She didn't speak, just rummaged in the fallen bag, her movements sharp. She pulled out a small navy blue box, the kind jewelry came in. Her fingers fumbled with the lid, snapping it open. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lay a white gold bracelet, delicate and elegant, with a single, perfectly cut diamond charm. It sparkled under the kitchen light. "He left it on my desk," Susie said, her voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. "A delivery," he said, "to my desk." Jed didn't need to ask who he was, he knew. He picked up the box, the weight of the bracelet surprisingly light. "What is it?" "A bracelet," she replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "At least $2,000, I'd guess. Maybe more. His secretary said it was from Calvin." She paused, a bitter laugh escaping her. "And this?" She pushed a small, cream-colored card towards him. It was a thick, expensive stock, a faint watermark visible under the light. Calvin's elegant, sweeping script filled the space. "A beautiful piece for a beautiful woman who deserves more beautiful things." Jed's jaw tightened. The words were a fresh slap, a violation in plain sight. This was a line clearly, undeniably crossed. It was no longer a lingering hand or a pointed comment. This was a tangible object, a bribe, a claim. "He asked about our Bermuda trip again today," Susie continued, her voice low now, almost a whisper. "Said he has a yacht. Bigger, he said, than any cruise ship we'd find. Offered to take us. For proper appreciation of my talents. he said. Jed stared at the bracelet, then at the card, the diamond glinting mockingly. He felt a cold knot form in his gut. HR, he managed, the word barely a breath. Susie snorted. HR reports directly to Calvin, Jed. Always has. Remember Betty Jo Higgins? The one from accounting? She filed a complaint about him last year. Disappeared a week later. Said she wasn't a good fit. Susie looked at him then, her eyes wide, a flicker of fear pushing through her anger. She was fired, Jed. Out on her ass. Jed took Susie's hand, the small, cold diamond of the bracelet, a hard knot in his palm. We'll fight this, he said, his voice low and steady. But we'll do it smart. No rushing in. We plan it out. The memory of Betty Jo Higgins, unceremoniously dismissed, echoed in the quiet kitchen. They couldn't afford to be reckless. He looked at Susie, at the worry etched around her eyes. You're not isolated, you know, Jed reminded her. You have your own income, you have me. That's a lot more than most. He spoke with a quiet confidence that came from years of precise calculation. He'd spent a decade in Army intelligence, then another 5 in private security before settling into the less dramatic world of development. His mind, trained to identify threats and build defenses, was now singularly focused on Calvin Thorne. This wasn't just about Susie, it was about the line that Calvin had crossed, the blatant disrespect for their life together. Their planning began that night and continued over the next few weeks, a methodical process that felt more like a military operation than a marital discussion. Jed mapped out Calvin's known patterns, Susie's work schedule, the internal reporting structure at Riverbend Financial. They reviewed emails, texts, every small interaction, looking for leverage, for weakness. One evening, about a month later, Susie walked through the door and practically collapsed onto the couch, her briefcase sliding to the floor with a soft thud. The exhaustion on her face was clear, visible even in the dim light of the living room. Rough day? Jed asked, watching her. She pulled out her phone, her thumb flying across the screen. You could say that. She handed it to him. A text message glowed on the display. It was from Calvin. Looking forward to our dinner Thursday. Wear something that matches those beautiful eyes of yours. R.S. Jed felt the familiar clench in his stomach. A hot wave of anger threatening to break through his careful calm. He took a slow breath, forcing himself to ask, his voice even. Dinner? What dinner is this? Susie rubbed her temples. It was supposed to be a team dinner. The whole Anderson portfolio group. Everyone was coming. Then one by one, everyone suddenly had a prior engagement. A sick child, a leaky pipe, a sudden pressing family matter. She sighed, the sound heavy. Funny, isn't it? How everyone became unavailable, leaving just me and Calvin. Jed's gaze sharpened. This was it. A classic isolation tactic. Cut off the target, make them feel alone, then move in. But for Jed, it wasn't a trap. It was an opportunity. Perfect, he murmured, almost to himself. Susie looked at him, confusion creasing her brow. Perfect? Jed, he's trying to corner me. And we're going to let him, Jed replied, a grim smile touching his lips. Only this time he'll be cornering himself. I talked to Dale Peterson, my college friend, remember? He's a lawyer, specializes in harassment cases. Susie's eyes widened. And? Dale thinks we have a case, Jed explained, his voice gaining momentum. But he needs more. He needs Calvin, explicitly, on record. Not just implying, not just hinting. He needs him to say it, clear as day. Susie hesitated, then admitted, I've been recording some of our office conversations, just on my phone. When it felt off, she shrugged, a small, helpless gesture. But the quality is always bad, too much background noise. Jed reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 small objects. The first was a silver feather lapel pin, no bigger than his thumbnail, intricate and delicate. The second was a standard Riverbend branded ballpoint pen, the kind given out as promotional items. He placed them on the table between them. No more phone recordings, and he said, this is better. He picked up the feather pin. Microphone, good for close-range conversations. Near-perfect audio. And this pen, he tapped it, a camera. High definition. Wireless. He paused, letting her take it in. They transmit to your phone, but also directly to a secure server. Only you, me, and Dale have access. No accidental deletions, no lost evidence. Susie picked up the feather, turning it over in her fingers. Her expression was a mix of apprehension and a dawning resolve. "It's like something out of a spy movie," she said, a faint tremor in her voice. Jed met her gaze, his own unwavering. "Sometimes," he said, "you need to fight fire with fire, and Calvin's about to get burned." Jed and Susie spent the rest of the night and all of Wednesday refining their plan for Thursday. They laid out scenarios, rehearsed dialogue, and discussed potential pitfalls. Susie would wear the devices, hidden but active. Her job was to keep Calvin talking, to prod him gently, to let him dig his own grave with his words. Jed, meanwhile, would be close by, tracking her location, ready to move in. What if he tries something physical? Susie's voice was small, barely a whisper, as they sat on the edge of their bed late Wednesday night. The question hung in the air, heavy and real. Jed pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. "You text checkmate," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for doubt. "And I'm there, instantly. I'll be across the street, watching the entrance. You send that text and I walk in. We don't wait for anything after that." He squeezed her, reassuring himself as much as her. "Remember, those devices are streaming everything. Every word, every movement. Dale will have it all. He can't touch you without proving our case beyond a doubt." Susie nodded against his chest, the faint scent of her shampoo comforting him. "It's not just for us, is it?" she murmured. "It's for the other women, too, the ones without someone to help them." "For them, too," Jed confirmed, stroking her hair. "Absolutely for them, too." Thursday night arrived with a heavy gray sky, promising rain. Susie stood in front of their bedroom mirror, adjusting the collar of her professional navy dress. It was a modest cut, deliberately chosen to be non-provocative, a shield against any accusation of invitation. She pinned the silver feather lapel mic to the inside of her jacket, a tiny, almost invisible glint. The Riverbend branded pen, a camera, slipped easily into the inner pocket of her purse. Each movement was precise, practiced. Jed came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You look like a woman about to take down a predator," he said, his voice quiet, then leaned down to kiss the top of her head. "Be careful, and remember checkmate." "I know," she said, her voice steady. She took a deep breath, then squared her shoulders. "I'll be fine." He watched her drive away, the taillights of her sedan disappearing down their street, swallowed by the early evening gloom. Then he walked to his own pickup, a sturdy, rust-colored Ford, and got in. He started the engine, letting it warm up for a moment before pulling away from the curb. His route was circuitous, designed to avoid being seen following her. He parked his truck across the street from the Old Mill Bistro, a quaint, expensive restaurant with dark wood and discreet lighting, exactly the kind of place Calvin Thorne would choose. He picked a spot where he could see the main entrance without being too obvious, blending in with the other parked cars. The rain began to fall, a soft patter on the roof of the truck. At precisely 7:15 p.m., Jed's phone pinged in his lap. Susie's recording devices were active. He opened the secure app he and Dale had configured. The screen flickered, then settled. A slightly shaky, low-angle view of a restaurant table appeared, dimly lit by a single candle. And then, a voice, smooth as polished stone, filled the cab of his truck. "Susie," Calvin's voice began, "you look stunning tonight, absolutely stunning." The sound of a chair scraping back. "Please sit. I reserved our table." Jed watched as a hand, manicured and ringed with a heavy gold signet, came into view, pushing out a chair. Susie sat down. The camera settled, providing a clearer view of the table, the flickering candle, and across from Susie, Calvin Thorne. The restaurant was dim, hushed, intimate. There were no other tables in clear sight. It was entirely wrong for a business dinner. It was exactly what Jed had expected. "Aren't we meeting the Anderson clients tonight, Calvin?" Susie's voice, through the small microphone, was remarkably steady, almost a touch too polite. Jed, listening in his truck, imagined her expression, the carefully constructed composure. Calvin let out a soft, dismissive wave of his hand. "Oh, change of plans, Susie. They couldn't make it. Something last minute. You know how these things go. His smile, Jed could see through the camera, was all teeth and no warmth. I thought we could discuss your future at Riverbend Financial instead. More personally. Jed's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. He wanted to storm in, to tear Calvin from that table by his silk tie. But he held himself back, a cold, hard knot of discipline keeping him in place. Not yet. Not until Calvin gave them everything they needed. Your future, Calvin continued, his voice dropping, taking on a conspiratorial tone. I've been thinking, Susie, Director of Asset Management, 2 levels above your current role. It's a big jump, yes. Others have more seniority, more time in the trenches. But you're different, special. You have that certain spark. A waiter, silent as a ghost, appeared with a bottle of chilled champagne and 2 flutes. Calvin had pre-ordered it. He took a flute and handed it to Susie, his fingers brushing hers, lingering a moment too long. To your promotion, Susie, he said, raising his glass. To your bright, bright future. He waited, his pale blue eyes fixed on her, until she took a small, hesitant sip. Calvin launched into a lengthy monologue about Susie being undervalued, her talents wasted. He spoke of luxury and opportunities, of a life she deserved, a life he could provide. You deserve a man who can open doors your husband never could, he purred, the words slithering through the speaker in Jed's truck. Susie met his gaze, her voice firm, unwavering. Jed and I are very happy, Calvin. And I prefer my promotions to be based on merit, not personal connections. Calvin chuckled, a low, condescending sound that grated on Jed's nerves. Merit only gets you so far, Susie. Real opportunities, the kind that truly elevate you, they come from connections, from the right relationships. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, making sure to include his face fully in the camera's frame. I could be an extremely valuable relationship for you, Susie. Extremely valuable. The dinner dragged on. Calvin ordered for Susie without asking, insisting she try certain dishes. He steered every business topic back to personal territory, making veiled comments about her marriage, asking invasive questions about their life, all while subtly hinting at his own immense wealth, the lavish vacations, the exclusive clubs he frequented. Jed watched, listened, and cataloged every word, every gesture. The rain outside his truck grew heavier, blurring the lights of the bistro. By the time the waiter cleared the dessert plates, Calvin had consumed most of the champagne and a bottle of expensive red wine. His speech was a little thicker, his smile a little looser, but his eyes, Jed noted, remained disturbingly clear. He leaned across the table again, closer this time. You know, he whispered, his voice thick with insinuation. I've already booked a suite upstairs, the presidential, actually. We could continue our discussion there, somewhere more, comfortable, more private. Jed felt the blood rush to his head. This was it, the moment. Calvin's hand, slow and deliberate, moved under the table. Jed could almost feel it, the brush against Susie's skin. The camera angle shifted slightly, showing Calvin's profile, his lips curving into a smug, self-satisfied smirk. I promise, Susie, he breathed, you'll enjoy every minute, every single minute. At that precise instant, Jed's phone vibrated in his hand. A single word flashed on the screen, checkmate. The instant checkmate flashed on his screen, Jed was already moving. He slammed the truck door shut, the sound swallowed by the rain, and sprinted across the street, ignoring the blare of a horn from a passing car. His phone screen went dark as he reached the bistro's heavy oak doors. He pushed through them, the sudden warmth and soft chatter of the restaurant a stark contrast to the cold fury in his gut. He spotted them immediately. Susie was standing by their secluded table, her back stiff, her hand still under the table, away from Calvin's reach. Calvin, red-faced, was half standing, his hand hovering awkwardly near where Susie had been seated. Is there a problem here? Jed's voice cut through the hushed ambiance of the restaurant. Louder than he intended, echoing slightly off the high ceilings, several heads at nearby tables turned. Curious eyes assessing the interruption. Calvin's head snapped up. His face, already flushed from wine, registered a split second of shock before morphing into unconcealed fury. Who let you in? He snarled, his voice rising, drawing more attention. This is a private establishment. I'm Jed Miller, Jed announced, stepping closer, his voice carrying clearly now, leaving no room for misunderstanding. I'm here because my wife just texted me that her boss is sexually harassing her. He looked directly at Calvin, then swept his gaze across the other diners, ensuring they heard every word. Calvin's bluster faltered. He straightened his expensive suit jacket, a sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. Harassing? That's absurd. We were discussing a promotion, a private business dinner. He gestured wildly. This man is a trespasser. Get him out of here. A promotion that involves booking a suite upstairs, Jed countered, his eyes locked on Calvin's. A promotion that involves your hand on my wife's leg? In front of witnesses? He glanced at Susie, a silent question. She met his gaze, a flicker of fear in her eyes, but also a fierce resolve. There are no witnesses. He's lying, Calvin spluttered, his voice cracking slightly. He looked around wildly, then back at Jed, trying to assert some semblance of his usual authority. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Oh, I think I do, Jed said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. And we have recordings, Calvin, clear as day. We have the proof, and we have a lawyer, Dale Peterson, who's already been briefed. He'll be in touch. Just then, the restaurant manager, a tall, impeccably dressed man, hurried over, his face a mask of practiced concern. Mr. Thorne, is everything all right? He asked, clearly recognizing Calvin as a regular and valuable patron. No, it is not, Calvin thundered, pointing at Jed. This man is causing a scene. Remove him. The manager, however, had caught Jed's words and the mention of sexual harassment in his establishment. His eyes flickered between the two men, then to a quiet, pale Susie. Perhaps, Mr. Thorne, it would be best if we continued this conversation in a more private setting. He gently but firmly began to usher Calvin away towards the back of the restaurant. Jed turned to Susie. Her face was pale, but her chin was up. He placed a hand on her back, guiding her towards the door. Let's go, Susie. Outside, the rain was coming down in earnest. Jed pulled her under the small overhang, holding her tight. She was shaking, a barely perceptible tremor that ran through her. Are you okay? He asked, his voice soft now. Susie leaned into him, her face buried in his shoulder. I think so, she whispered, her voice muffled. It's done, though, isn't it? It started, Jed corrected gently, pulling back just enough to look into her eyes. We did the right thing, Susie, the only thing. The next day, as promised, Dale Peterson began the legal proceedings, filing a formal complaint against Calvin Thorne and, by extension, Riverbend Financial. The initial response from Riverbend's HR department, still heavily influenced by Calvin, was immediate and aggressive. They launched a quiet campaign to discredit Susie's claims, painting her as an opportunist, envious of Calvin's success, perhaps even unstable. Susie found herself facing a cold shoulder at work, ostracized by colleagues who feared Calvin's reprisal, and receiving thinly veiled threats from HR to withdraw her complaint for the sake of her career. The high-profile nature of the case also brought Jed's own reputation at Prairie Point Developments under scrutiny. Questions were asked, whispered rumors circulated, and some clients seemed suddenly hesitant. The pressure mounted, a heavy weight on both their shoulders. But in the quiet moments in their home, Jed and Susie reaffirmed their commitment. This was a long road, they knew, but it was a road they would walk together. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. Calvin Thorne did not take the complaint lightly. His retaliation was swift and aggressive. Whispers about Susie spread through Riverbend Financial like a virus, painting her as a manipulative opportunist. Her professional standing, carefully built over years, began to crumble under the weight of his influence. Projects were rerouted, meetings she should have attended were held without her, and her emails often went unanswered. Jed and Susie found themselves increasingly isolated. Friends became cautious, social invitations dwindled, and professional contacts grew wary, unwilling to be associated with the high-profile scandal. The quiet hum of their lives was replaced by a constant, low-level anxiety. Dale Peterson, however, worked tirelessly. He was a bulldog in a suit, poring over every detail, every communication. The legal fees mounted, a steady drain on their savings. Jed's project at Prairie Point Developments, a substantial condo complex, hit unexpected delays. some subtly engineered by contacts within the local construction and finance communities who had ties to Riverbend. The financial strain was undeniable, adding another layer of pressure. Susie battled inner demons. The ostracization at work, the thinly veiled accusations, the public judgment from people who only knew Calvin's version of events, it all chipped away at her self-doubt. Jed watched her, his heart aching, struggling to balance his protective instincts with the strategic patience he knew was necessary. His military intelligence training, usually a source of calm precision, was pushed to its limits by the emotional stakes. Then, a breakthrough. One afternoon, Dale called, his voice tight with excitement. "Jed, you're not going to believe this. Betty Jo Higgins just called me." Well, and the name was a ghost from Susie's past, a woman dismissed by Calvin for a similar complaint. Emboldened by Susie's public stand, Betty Jo had come forward with her own story, and more importantly, a meticulously kept diary of Calvin's harassment. Betty Jo's testimony was a crack in Calvin's carefully constructed facade. Dale quickly identified other potential victims, women who had left Riverbend quietly, their careers stalled, their reputations tarnished. He began building a pattern, a clear and undeniable history of Calvin's predatory behavior. Jed, meanwhile, used his own connections, discreetly verifying aspects of Calvin's financial dealings. He couldn't find anything overtly criminal, but he uncovered minor irregularities, small accounting discrepancies that, while not illegal, pointed to a pattern of bending rules and operating in gray areas. It added another layer to the man they were fighting. Susie continued to endure. Riverbend Financial, forced to acknowledge the growing noise, initiated an internal investigation. Susie sat through grueling interrogations, facing accusatory questions from HR personnel who seemed more interested in protecting the company's image than in finding the truth. Each session left her drained, emotionally raw. Through it all, Jed was her rock. He reminded her every evening of their shared purpose, of her strength. "You're doing this for everyone, Susie," he'd say, holding her hand. "For Betty Jo, for all the others he pushed aside." The decision to go public was not made lightly. It meant opening their lives to even greater scrutiny, but they knew it was their best chance to expose Calvin fully and prevent him from harming others. Jed reached out to a former colleague, now a reporter for the local evening news. The reporter, sensing a compelling human story and seeing the clear evidence Dale had assembled, agreed to cover their story. The first news report aired on a Tuesday evening. It was a concise, factual account presenting Susie's claims, supported by the recordings and Betty Jo's testimony. The media attention was immediate and intense. Suddenly, Riverbend Financial was in the spotlight, under immense public pressure to take the allegations seriously. The quiet, insidious battle had burst into the open. Jed and Susie sat together watching the news report, holding hands. The road ahead was long, fraught with uncertainty, but a new resolve settled over them. Their lives would be irrevocably changed, they knew, but they were ready for the trial. The trial began with a cold snap in late autumn. The courthouse, usually a quiet hub of local bureaucracy, was swarming with reporters and camera crews. Jed sat beside Susie every day, a silent anchor as the grueling process unfolded. Each testimony, each cross-examination, felt like a fresh wound. Susie took the stand on the third day. Her voice, though sometimes trembling, was clear as she recounted Calvin's harassment, detailing the incidents with vivid, painful precision. Jed watched her, his throat tight, remembering the fear in her eyes, the quiet strength she now displayed. The audio and video evidence Dale played for the jury was damning. Calvin's voice, silky and explicit, filled the courtroom, undeniable proof of his intent, his hand caught on camera moving under the table. The jury, a cross-section of ordinary people from their community, shifted in their seats, their faces a mixture of disgust and rapt attention. Then came Betty Jo Higgins. Her testimony, calm and articulate, corroborated Susie's account, describing her own similar experiences and the subsequent pressure that led to her departure. Other former Riverbend employees, emboldened by the public nature of the trial, also came forward, painting a clear and disturbing pattern of Calvin's abuse of power. Dale Peterson, with quiet ferocity, wove their stories together, meticulously presenting the chilling evidence of Calvin's systematic exploitation and his calculated attempts to silence victims. Calvin Thorne's defense team, as expected, went on the offensive. They tried to pick apart Susie's character, twisting her words, suggesting she was manipulative and seeking financial gain. They painted Jed as a jealous, overprotective husband, prone to exaggeration. Jed sat through it all, his face impassive, but inside a quiet rage simmered. When it was his turn to testify, Jed spoke with the calm, factual precision of his military training. He recounted his observations, the fear he saw in his wife's eyes, and their strategic planning. He didn't grandstand, didn't preach. He simply stated their desire for justice, not just for Susie, but for every woman Calvin had harmed. "We just wanted the truth to come out," he concluded, looking directly at the jury, "and for him to be held accountable." The jury deliberated for what felt like an eternity, 3 agonizing days. Jed and Susie waited in a small, windowless conference room, the silence punctuated only by the distant hum of the courthouse. Their fate, their financial future, their very peace of mind hung in the balance. Then the summons came. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. The foreman read the verdict, a dry, measured voice delivering life-altering consequences. Calvin Thorne was found liable for sexual harassment and the intentional infliction of emotional distress. Riverbend Financial was also held accountable for its negligence and complicity for failing to protect its employees. The courtroom erupted, Calvin's face, pale and ashen, hardened into a mask of pure disbelief. He was financially ruined, his professional reputation in tatters, publicly humiliated. He finally paid the price. Jed reached for Susie's hand, squeezing it tight. The victory, though undeniably sweet, was also tinged with a deep weariness, a profound sense of the lasting impact of their ordeal. They had won, but they were forever changed. The world they knew, the quiet life they had built, was gone. They sold their house in the spring, the for sale sign feeling both heavy and liberating. Jed found a new position at a smaller, ethically focused development firm out west, a place where integrity still meant something. Susie took time for herself, slowly healing, before eventually finding a new role that championed women in the workplace, helping others navigate the kind of darkness she had faced. They packed what they needed, leaving much behind. As Jed drove their old pickup down a long, open highway, the Midwestern landscape slowly giving way to new horizons, Susie leaned her head against his shoulder. The past was behind them, a difficult, painful chapter. But the road ahead, though unknown, felt clear. They were forever changed, bearing the scars of their fight, but they had found their own quiet morality in the long, winding road home. The battle had been long and costly, a grind that left its mark on everything Jed and Susie touched. They had faced down a powerful man and a complacent institution, choosing the hard road of principle over the easier path of silence. The victory in court was a legal one, a public vindication, but it didn't erase the sleepless nights, the whispered slanders, or the gnawing anxiety. Their move out west to a quieter place was an acknowledgement that some wounds heal better with distance. They carried the scars, a shared history of standing their ground when the world tried to push them down. It wasn't about vengeance, not anymore. It was about finding a piece that had been stolen and rebuilding a life on foundations stronger than any man's ambition.